So do you think there is something in the worldview or the mindset of the scientific community that allows that to happen? Is it more about the process of how things are done and the division of labor in it that allows that to happen? Or what's your sort of your sociological reflection on what's going on in science as a society that allows that continual building upon a previous, bad idea after bad idea?
Yeah.
Or let's be more fair to that. A non-self-reflective idea following on a non-self-reflective idea.
Yeah.
Because you're a scientist and you're not thinking that way.
I'm doing my best not to think that way. Yes. But it's difficult because you're embedded in a system, and your presumption is that the system, the ideas that the unreflected ideas that come out of the system are accurate and worthy of acting on. And I don't think I don't think you can just blame reductionist science for this problem. Reductionist science is a product of an ideology, and reductionist science is itself a problem. And so you have reductionist science in which people are used to looking at the small picture thing and the subdivided segments, and basically risk assessment is about what will happen anywhere at any time at any point in the future, right? That is the premise of risk assessment. We're not premising risk assessment on the idea we're going to protect some of the people some of the time. It's based on the idea that this thing is pretty much safe. Maybe there's a small risk that we decided to live with, but the social contract of risk assessment is not we're not allowing catastrophic errors every single time we give permission for a new GMO or a new chemical to be put on the market. So, but that's not the mindset of scientists. But at the same time, to look at those big picture issues. Right? It works very well for the industry, which kind of has this sort of backroom control over science, for scientists to have that mindset. Right? They're very comfortable with that mindset. But at the same time, scientists will look at big picture things if you let them. There's no sort of genetic hardwired thing that says we have to do reductionistic science. Scientists are happy to look at the big picture if you provide the right incentive environment for them. And they will actually oppose you. If it's outside of their, if it's within their if it's a conflict of interest for them to look at the small picture, they will stop looking at the small picture. Right? A lot of these issues are driven by conflicts of interest, and the political process of risk assessment, in many ways, is the way that you can think about it is the setting up of conflicts of interest. So there's a whole series of conflicts of interest that are set up in the risk assessment within the institutions, which stop scientists from doing real science. Right? So the politicians know from their day-to-day activities that if you organize a conflict of interest, you can pretty much predict what outcome you're going to get from your political system. And they apply that logic to science. And lo and behold, it works. Even though scientists think that they're far too rigorous to be taken in by financial and careerist opportunities and stock prices and the opportunities of being CEOs of big businesses. My experience has been it's not true. And in fact, they're more vulnerable to those things because they think it's not true. And so politicians have set up systems, for example, in which the EPA is asked to oversee regulations that it wrote in the first place, for example, or that scientists often are appointed to committees who have a positive interest in their science going forward. So you'll appoint to a committee, you'll appoint a committee of people to look into the risk assessment of GMOs, people who make GMOs. Right? They're never going to come back to you with an answer of GMOs are a horrible thing and we should never be doing this kind of stuff until 100 years' time when we understand ecosystems properly or whatever. They're just not going to give you that kind of answer. And any good politician knows they're not going to give that kind of answer, and sure enough, they don't. And the reductionist I would call it an ideology of science. That reductionist ideology is driven by that conflicted situation that scientists find themselves in. Right? You can interpret all data in any number of frames, and what scientists are in the habit of doing is adopting the frame that is most beneficial to their worldview and to their pocketbooks, right? And so the reductionist mindset that people critique is a product of a political system in which those scientists are operating more or less in their own general good interests. And there are, that doesn't mean that scientists are not good people or they're not, in many cases, ethical, but they don't have the intellectual tools to think about it this way in most cases. It's an unconscious process. You have this received frame and you use it and you don't question it, whereas you could. And I had to go through that process of looking at the frames and looking at the data again and looking at the mindsets of the people that I was interacting with, and it was a whole complicated process of intellectually breaking out of that mindset. That was difficult and took me years.